Hello everybody. Today's video is about the Olympus PEN D. I've been after a half frame camera for a little while, and the PEN F is a bit more expensive, which because it's a kind of proper SLR half frame camera. And so I thought, well, actually I might see if I can just pick up a smaller, slightly more affordable half frame camera. So I got the Olympus PEN D. I didn't know a huge amount about the PEN D before getting it. I saw a lot of PEN Ds, the PEN S, PEN EE, lots of different versions. And I got this PEN D. It was £40 from memory, and I think made an offer basically, and said, well, they had a case with it, and I said, I don't really want the case. Without the case, we take it for a bit less money, and on eBay, and they accepted. And then when it arrived, the seller included the case anyway because he's a good bloke. So, which was really kind of him. And actually, I've realised since getting the camera that it was really good that he did include the case, because with this camera, the light meter is selenium cell, and as long as light is going through there, it's using up the selenium. So often these cameras, if they haven't been kept in a case when they weren't being used, then the selenium's been all used up and the camera will no longer meter. So when you're not using this camera, you need to pop it in the case, keep it in the dark, and then but this camera meters perfectly, and so it's been well looked after, and when it's not been used, somebody kept it in a case. So I'll give you a quick rundown of the history, because there are lots of different versions. So the PEN S, as I say, was the first version that had no meter, but like this, it was a fully manual camera. And by that, what I mean is you can set the aperture, you can set the shutter speed, and so you could use Sunny 16 or an external light meter with the PEN S, but it didn't have a meter like this has here. And then the PEN D came out, which was this one, which is 1962. And this doesn't take batteries because it's selenium for the metering. It's a completely uncoupled meter, so what that means is the meter is telling you with this needle what to set on the lens for the shutter speed and the aperture, essentially, which I'll come to in a minute. But you can completely ignore this meter if you want to. You sort of have to think of the meter on this camera as it's almost like you've got a little external meter sitting in a hot shoe, and it's not talking to the rest of the camera. So that's the PEN D that came out in 62. Then there was the PEN D2, which came out in 64. Now that had CDS exposure meter, which, I mean, the main thing to think about it basically is it took batteries which are now harder to get, or you can't get them, so you have to buy different batteries and then buy an adapter and things like that, so the voltage is right, which is a bit of a faff. And then there's a PEN D3, which is a really good little half frame camera, very similar to this again, but takes batteries. So again, you've got to kind of faff around and try and find an adapter to make that battery work, but it's totally doable. And PEN D2 and the D3 are great cameras. What I liked about this was this original PEN D has all the features of the PEN D2 and the D3, you know, manual aperture, manual shutter speed. I can set the ISO and that powers the meter, but I don't need to worry about batteries. I don't need to worry about adapters and old batteries that you can't get anymore and trying to make them work, because it just uses a selenium cell. So if you get a good one that still meters, then I think the PEN D, the 62 version that I've got here, is the one to get. Now, when I bought this, I didn't know all this, and so I think I was actually quite lucky. I could quite easily have got, without really knowing the difference, a PEN EE. Now the PEN EE looks very similar to this camera, and there's lots of different versions of the PEN EE, and that came out in 61. Basically, the way to look at it is this was the expensive model because you can set the aperture, you can set the shutter speed. There's more going on here, probably more expensive to make mechanically. The PEN EE is fully automatic, so you can't set anything. It's basically a point and shoot camera. And the PEN EE, again, they come in selenium versions. They come in versions with CDS exposure meters that take batteries and things like that. And they're fully automatic. So if you don't get the right battery and adapt it to the right voltage, then you've got problems with your exposure because it's a fully automatic camera. So whereas with this camera, it's basically a fully manual, fully mechanical camera. I suppose a way to think of it is if this wasn't a half frame camera, if this was a full frame camera, then this is like a Nikon FM, fully mechanical, you can ignore the meter or you can use the meter. Whereas a Pen EE is like a Nikon FE. It's not fully mechanical. If the battery dies or you don't put the right battery in, then your meter is going to be wrong. So yeah, I would definitely go for the Pen D or the Pen D2 or the Pen D3, because you know it's much more fun to be able to set your aperture, so like f1.9 or f16, or your shutter speed from it goes up to 500th of a second, which isn't the fastest thing in the world, but that's fine. And it goes down to, you got bulb, or was it 1/8 of a second. So it's certainly one of these cameras to keep an eye out for. And I've seen them going for silly money if you buy them from Japan, but occasionally one will come up for sale in the UK, and make an offer, you might get a bargain like I did. Okay, so how it works. First of all, so you can open the back here, go like this, twist it, the whole back comes off. Back looks like that. That's inside. So as you can see, it's half frame. So on a normal film camera, 35mm film camera, this piece of metal here wouldn't be there, because that's the frame of a normal, from there to there is your normal 35mm sort of frame. But with that in there, it essentially reduces it to, I think it's 18 by 24mm. So you've got a portrait, a vertical photo. So with a normal camera, you'd have to go like that. But with this one, everything's in portrait by default. So if you want to take landscape with this camera, you have to. It's the opposite of what you're used to. But actually, it's a great camera for taking out and taking portraits, and you just, because it's in portrait mode by default. So it's quite. But it takes a bit of getting used to. And then you wind it on for shutters here. Very quiet. But the only thing where it does make a noise is when you're winding it on. When it finishes the wind on, hear it click. So it's got a bit of a click to it, but actually taking photos, really quiet. It's got a leaf shutter, I think. But you got that click when it's finished winding on to the next frame. So if you want to be a bit stealthy and take street photos, then take that, walk around, and then wind it on. Don't wind it on straight after. And you've got I don't know if you can really see on the video, but you can look through there. There's the viewfinder. But let's put the back on. You'll notice with a lot of my cameras at the moment, all of my cameras now really going forward, they've all got these peak design clips, which I'm since sort of converting over to them. So what you do is, your camera strap has one of these, and it just goes in, push it down, and it's in. And that's not coming out. And this is, I was thinking, how strong can these be? These are really strong. These can easily carry like DSLRs, big heavy DSLRs. So with film cameras, no problem at all, especially a little film camera like this. And what's nice about them is you could just have that as just a on the wrist single one. And then when you want to, then you click it on to have a full-on camera strap, and you can change your straps and all kinds of things. So after trying them out, I really like them. It's not sponsored in any way, by the way, just something I've just seen other people been trying peak design. I thought I'd give it a go. And I like being able to not have a strap and very quickly then put a strap on when I want to. And that's kind of the benefit of them, I think. Anyway, so how it works is, you've seen inside, you wind it on like that, take the photos there. You've got your frame counter here. You have to manually set this. It doesn't reset back to 0, so you have to manually reset that back, and then each time you take a photo, it's going like that. And then you can manually reset it when you put new film in. So the way the meter works is very similar to, well, basically identical to how I described in an earlier video on the Olympus 35 SP, which is that you've got a needle there that is moving. So if I cover up the light, if I can get it to cover up the selenium cell, and you'll see it move, see, like that. So what that's doing is giving you, you've got indicator numbers from 7 to 17, whatever the needle's pointing at. So it's kind of pointing at 8 there, I would say, if you can see there, it's pointing at 8. If I put my finger over, it's now on 7, right? So what that's basically saying is there's a little hole, a little square there, and you need to get the number to show up in that square, and then you've got your camera set to the right settings. So what I tend to do is think, what aperture do I want to shoot at? So I'll think, well, I want to shoot at f4, and then so I decide that first, and then I start moving the shutter speed until I see the number. So there we go. Do you see that? It went from, I was turning it and it went to an 8. So now 60th of a second at f4 is a correctly exposed photo. But then if I think, oh, actually I want to shoot at f8, okay, then got to turn this till I get a 7. There we go, or whatever the number is that it's showing me there. So it's showing me an 8 actually, so I'll put that on the 8 and just need to make sure I haven't messed up where I had it first. Now once you've got it set correctly, what you can do is grip both rings and turn them together like that, and that will keep the number from changing in there. So if you've got that set on let's see if I can show you. So if I've got that set on 8 like that, then I can grip both rings and turn them together, and as long as that keeps that at 8, which is the guide number on the meter. So that's the quick way of keeping it exposing correctly, changing your settings. So you go, I'm on f5.6, I want to be shooting at f11, and grip both rings together, turn it to f11, that remains on 8, I'm fine, but you can turn them independently as well. So I really like that because it's an uncoupled meter. It gives you a guide, and then you can use those 2 rings on the lens to work it out. And once you kind of understand that, then this is a really straightforward and easy camera to use. Obviously you rewind the film by turning that. It doesn't lift up or anything like that. It's just recessed, and you turn it when you want to rewind the film. And in order to rewind the film, you have to push this in. Now this is on a spring and does not stay in. So, or at least definitely on mine. So you push it in like that, and then you turn until you hear the film pop out the back of the spool. Then you can let go, which is actually similar to my Leica M2, where I push the button in and then lift and rewind the film. On some of these models, you have to keep the button pushed in the whole time while you're rewinding. On the later button version, you just push it in and it clicks in. And this kind of reminded me of that. Push that in, keep your thumb in there, and rewind it. Job done. And then really the only final thing to say is that, and it was the only part of the camera that I was a bit worried about, and before I got used to it, was I'm used to being able to focus through the finder, but with this camera, and all my cameras kind of, you focus through the finder, whether it's a range finder and you're lining up the images, or it's an SLR and you're actually seeing what's in focus as you focus. But with this, you have meters on here. So 0.8 up to infinity. And there's definitely, you get to about there, and then it's a bit more pressure to move it through the next ones. Okay, and you see the lens moving as I do that. So I've taken, because it's half frame, you get 72 photos out of a roll of film, 36 exposure roll of film, which is brilliant. What I found was, to get all my pictures in focus, was this is a camera you take out on a sunny day, basically. I wouldn't say this is a camera you would use in low light as much. If you take this out on a sunny day, then you can shoot at probably f11 or f16, which means that most things are going to be in focus if you set the camera to there. So you'll see the 3 meter mark is a different color. So if you set it there, I'm not sure if it's like a hyperfocal distance, but essentially anything from a meter away to infinity pretty much I think is in focus if you're shooting at about f11 or f16. So you can just leave it there and forget it really, and everything's in focus. If I was taking a photo of a building and it was quite a distance away, but not at infinity, I might move that up to a 5. But when you've got 72 pictures, you're more likely to sort of say, well, I'll take one at 5 and I'll take one at at 3 meters. And one of them will be in focus, but in reality, if you're shooting at f11 or f16, they might both be in focus. Obviously, you've got infinity for things right off in the very far distance. Now, for close-up, I did take some pictures with this indoors in lower light, and that's going to be a bit more of a challenge because you're going to need to open the lens up and shoot at, say, f2.8 or even f1.9, which is much more shallow depth of field. And this is a 32mm focal length. Oh no, sorry, it's it's 32mm f1.9. But because it's half frame, it's not actually a true 32mm. I think it's more like a 40mm. It's like having a crop factor on a sensor. So if you're taking portraits indoors and you need to shoot at f1.9 or f2.8, what I tended to do was stick it on 0.8, which is the closest it can focus, 0.8 of a meter. Now, 0.8 of a meter for me, as a man, so the length of my arm, I don't know if I've got average length arms or not really, but I measured the length of my arm and it was about 0.8 of a meter. So if I can reach forward and touch somebody, say I could just reach forward and touch the tip of your nose with my arm fully extended, that's about 0.8 of a meter. So if somebody's basically within touching distance, then they're within about 0.8 of a meter. They were for me. So then I could take a picture at f1.9, f2.8, and I'd know I'm pretty much going to get them in focus. And when I got the negatives back and I looked through them, they all were. It was great. I very rarely miss focus with this camera. It's much more forgiving than you'd think. And certainly if you're out and about in good light and you're shooting at the higher f numbers, or is it the lower f numbers, where the lens is closed down, stopped down to f11, f16, then pretty much, I mean, I must admit, I didn't really take any pictures at 0.9 of a meter, 1 meter. I pretty much used it at 0.8 within arm's reach for portraits, and I used it at 3 or 5 or infinity when I was out and about, and then all my pictures were in focus. So on this one, I've got a filter, but which is a 43mm filter, and so if you're looking to get one and you want to get a filter for it, it's 43mm. Often they're sold without it, and they look like this. Yeah, it's a great little camera. As I say, it's very quiet shutter there to shoot. You only get a click when you wind it on, but that's fine. And just keep it in a bag when you're not using it, because the selenium cell's on there. If it was on the lens, it would be easier because you could just put a lens cap on and that would cover it up. But that was probably the only thing to think about, really. Yeah, great little camera. If you're liking these videos, like and subscribe, and I shall make more. Thank you very much.